being live streamed and recorded. And to assist people watching or listening online, can I remind members to identify your name and role before speaking? So moving on to apologies for absence. Item number 1, we have apologies today from Councillor Dean Carroll, Councillor Richard Marshall, Tanya Miles, Executive Director of People, Mark Barrow, Executive Director of Place. James, I know, is joining us online. Thank you, James, even though I know you've not been particularly well, so thank you for that. And we've also got Natalie McPhail online, and Councillor David Minory online, and Councillor Tom Biggins online. Welcome to all of you. Item number 2, disclosable interests. I don't believe we have any disclosable interests today, so moving on to item number 3 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 19th of April. I'm happy to propose those minutes.
Councillor Ian Nellens, I'm happy to second.
Okay, all those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 4, public question time. We've received 2 public questions today. The first question is from Dr. Alison Caffin, which I believe sorry, Tim, I've just promoted you, which I believe Tim Collard is going to read. Thank you, Tim.
Yes, thank you. The question is this: how will the council, its planning and regulatory services departments and ecologists take into account the recent ruling of the planning inspector into the Footbridge Farm intensive poultry unit planning appeal at Tasley Bridge North? In particular, how will they respond to the inspector's conclusion that the odour and air quality modelling by AS Modelling and Data, which has been and continues to be used to support many IPU applications across the county, cannot be relied upon?
Thank you, Tim. And Councillor Ian Nellens is going to answer the question.
Thank you for the question. In terms of the application, the local planning authority sought advice from EDAS to seek their view on the modelling used to ensure it was fit for purpose. The view was that it was. In addition, we have advice from our own environmental protection team, who were also in agreement with the modelling. Both of these are technical experts in this field, and with this was given significant weight in the planning balance. The application, which was refused, was then subject to an appeal decision. The appellant is seeking a judicial review of the inspector's decision, so we will need to wait for the outcome of that process. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nellens. The second question we have is from Victoria Moore, who I believe is with us. Do come forward if you'd like to take a seat next to Councillor Barrow, and perhaps you could do the microphone for Victoria. When you're ready, Victoria, over to you.
Hi, my question is related to the Taylor Wimpey development, Sutton Grange on Otley Road. Residents were told that a play park would be built by the end of phase 1. That was back in 2017. It is now 2023 and there is still no park. Taylor Wimpey have now left the development as it is completed, but with uneven roads and footpaths, lack of street lights and missing road signs, it's far from finished. And residents would like to know what is happening as they feel they're being ignored.
Okay, thank you very much, Victoria. So the answer is Councillor Rob Macy.
Thank you. So the Section 106 agreement attached to the planning permission states that all public open space is to be transferred to Shrewsbury Town Council with a maintenance sum. Shrewsbury Town Council will then be responsible for laying out the play area. The transfer of the land and the maintenance sum, as outlined in the Section 106, has not yet taken place, so therefore it remains with the developer at the moment. So that's...
Okay, thank you, Rob. So, Councillor Buckley, do you want to make a comment?
I'm saying it's not really an explanation. You haven't explained why has it been delayed for 5 years. I think it was a really important question. It hasn't been done. You're telling her it hasn't been done. Why? Why hasn't that been torn up?
We don't need a debate. I just didn't want you whispering because it's rude because other people can't hear you. What I would say to that is that the lady needs to contact the developer in the first instance because it has not been transferred to Shrewsbury Town Council. It's not in our gift. Right, moving on to item number 5, member question times. There are no member questions this time. Item number 6, scrutiny items, new housing developments, task and finish group. Councillor Joyce Barrow.
Thank you very much, and I think it's quite appropriate that I'm giving this now when that lady has just said what she said. I'm bringing this before Cabinet. It's the report of the Place Overview Committee setting out the findings and recommendations of the Housing Development Task and Finish Group. The topic was picked up by the committee, which commissioned a Task and Finish Group in response to an issue that was identified by a local member, raising the issues of residents who had moved into their homes on new build developments. I'd like to thank the members of the Task and Finish Group who committed to the task, and I believe together we have developed evidence-based recommendations that will add value to the council and communities. I would also like to thank the officers who shared their knowledge and experience and supported our work, and to the organisations that helped inform our work. I don't want to repeat the details that you have before you in the covering report and the Task and Finish Group, but there are a few points that I want to highlight and draw attention to. One of the key learning points was that developers can appoint their own private sector companies to carry out the work, and therefore the council's own service is in competition with them. The council service cannot get involved in disputes where they were not the provider unless there is a safety concern. This is something that needs to be communicated to ensure that there is greater awareness, both for members and for communities and the owners of new build homes. We also looked at open spaces on developments and options about the administration of these areas. So our recommendations are: always encourage the local authority to use its own building control service for its own developments or those of its ALMO. Request its building control and communication services to collaborate to develop a plan to increase awareness of building control, the New Homes Quality Board and the Housing Ombudsman to would-be homeowners in Shropshire. Include building control in the programme of induction training provided to all elected members following all council elections in 2025. Support Canovi and Star Housing's work in creating their own open space management company. Proceed to recruit a dedicated officer with a specific remit of ensuring well-designed, high-quality, coherent, biodiverse open space on new developments, and review its section 38/278 process to create a greater focus on securing legal agreements early in the planning process. The response to these recommendations and the progress in delivering those that are accepted will be received by and monitored by the new Economy and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The first meeting of the new Economy and Environment Overview and Scrutiny Committee is on the 20th of July. It would be great to receive the response to the recommendations and the action delivery plan for those that have been accepted, and an indication of when would be a good time to receive a progress report. I would suggest perhaps the meeting on the 9th of November. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Barron. Now I know that I've got Councillor Tom Biggins wants to speak on this item, and Tom's joining us online, and then Councillor Julian Dean. Tom.
Yes, thank you, Leader. I'm Tom Biggins, one of the two members.
You're on mute, Tom.
Oh, am I?
It says you're not on mute, actually.
Yes, can you hear me?
No, I can't. Tom, can I suggest you leave and come back, and I'll take Councillor Julian Dean's question first.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, he's left us and come back again. Councillor Julian Dean.
Thank you, and thank you, Joyce, for bringing forward those recommendations from the Task and Finish Group, which it was a good Task and Finish Group. It was a good piece of work, cross-party work, and thank you very much to all the officers who came to it. There were some really interesting things to. One of the important things I think is just looking in terms of the future and the sorts of developers that we want to encourage and the ones we don't want to encourage is the existence of this thing called the New Homes Board, which is there in the report. I think we should definitely be highlighting that and making sure that our planners are aware of that. That is a way of some sort of quality assurance amongst developers. There was also, I think, some interesting evidence that there had been a period of very rapid development when, frankly, we weren't able to keep up as a council with ensuring that conditions were being met. And I think that was concerning, but hopefully it's not something that we will repeat. So it's great, in particular, to see the recommendation for us staff member, and I hope that that can be pursued despite all the financial difficulties, because I think it's really crucial that we do get to grips with the quality of developments and the green spaces around developments. Just slightly concerned with the wording here around the recommendation. I hope the Cabinet is going to accept all the recommendations. I think they're all solid. It says following the Task and Finish Group, including revisiting progress and impact within 12 months. That sounds great. Following the approval of the action plan. So we're waiting for the approval of the action plan, and then we start a timeline. So it would be good to know when we expect to see that action plan, because that obviously triggers that 12-month timeline. And as Joyce has suggested, it would be good to see that action plan at the next scrutiny committee, if at all possible. So some reassurance on that would be welcome.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Tom, are you able to join us now?
Hopefully, can you hear me?
Oh.
Can you hear me?
One moment, Tom, we're going to pause because we think we've got an issue in the room. So 1 second.
Okay.
Can I just say how welcome this report is, and the Task and Finish you set up? We have a couple of large-scale developments in Task and Bridge North that have exactly the problems that are listed in the report, and that frustration we heard from the member of the public, we had very similar ones. There was a large gap between it being handed over actually to Shropshire Council for the grounds to be maintained, and I think that this is really timely with the local plan coming on stream, because the volume of house building is going to increase and we're going to have some more of those large strategic sites. So what I would like to see really is for us just to be stricter and tighter, using these legal avenues that we have around embedding in the legal requirements and using the bonds as you've described. But why can't we attach that to the things which are being delayed? Why can't we withhold the bond, for example, until the development's handed over to the town council, so there's an incentive for the developer to complete every part of their obligation? So I think that we could go even further and try and tie in some of these loose ends into particularly the bond, because I think that money will speak to these developers.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure that we can hear from Tom just yet. Tracy, was there anything you wanted to come in and say on that? Very fortuitous that you're here today representing Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I think I would agree. I think the group was really good. We actually all learnt quite a bit, didn't we? I think there's a really good understanding of the things that we can get involved with and the things we can't get involved with. There are processes around 278 and 38 agreements, which in all councils it takes years and years for those to actually be those sites to be adopted. It's the same for open space, and it's a lot around the process, but it's also around having the resources to be able to take it through the process quickly. So I think 38 and 278 are a good example where we are many years behind. We have a huge backlog in that area, and the team are furiously trying to work through that, actually getting resources. And I don't mean that we haven't got the money to get the resource, it's actually getting the skilled people to do this in an area of highways which is really difficult to recruit in. We had someone that came to assist us on 278 and 38. He was with us for 6 months and then had a heart attack and died. So the team were pretty heartbroken. We then recruited another person. That person was with us for 2 months and then went back to Cambridgeshire. We've recruited another person. So and that person's been with us for a few weeks now. So we keep trying to get this work off the ground and we're struggling. So and members know, they have lots of conversations with Gemma and Mark, and they've shared that with you. But it is something that we're very much focused on and trying to, and we will develop that within the action plan. We are exploring all different avenues and talking to other authorities around what they can possibly do. So we will make some progress on that. In terms of the open space post, that will resourced within existing budgets. So we've got, we've been sort of scratching around to bring money together because we see this as a really important post, and that was seen through the task force, and it was very apt that the speaker today actually raised exactly that issue. We need the resource in so that we can actually build in that quality public open space into developments and make sure that the provision happens on site at the right time. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. So Tom, can we try again?
Yes. Can you hear me?
No.
Can you hear me?
Still can't hear you, Tom.
Sign language.
Okay.
We can, Tom, if it's any consolation.
Oh, you can, yes.
Yeah.
James?
Oh, can you hear me?
Right, problem is obviously across.
Yeah, there you go. They can't hear us.
Oh,
It's in the room.
Right, well, hang on then.
Put it in the chat. It's a pretty tight question. Sorry.
You could actually do a transcript, couldn't you, in the chat?
Sorry, can you try and speak again?
Oh, that's true.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Is he saying it?
The others couldn't hear you, so the other speaker.
Can everybody else mute? You've got your... I'm going to take a 5-minute break, so I'll see if we can sort this, okay?
It's a transcript, so he could speak and you could see what he's saying. His transcript is an option.
Yeah, some things that.
You're on Monday.
Again, if we can't hear anything, then we should test it before we start.
Yeah, but it might be years if you ask a quick thing.
Or you could phone me, hopefully.
I was wondering, that's one. Thank you. Councillor Tom Biggins.
Thank you, Leader. I'll be very brief. I just wanted to tag on planning, the discussion really about planning conditions onto this topic. I sat on the Task and Finish committee, and we came to some very good conclusions. This particular concern I have is when the council imposes a planning condition, when planning is granted, and then sometime later the developer puts in to vary that condition, and that happens, and the original condition is substantially watered down. And the example I want to give you is as per my member's question at the last full council, and that was the so far non-installation of the mini roundabout at the junction of Claypit Street and London Road in Whitchurch, which is a planning condition, no question about this, of the consent to build out, I think it's about 70 properties off Old Port Road. Now, the first thing is the original planning condition, and I'll just read it out, is belt and braces. It says no development shall take place until full engineering details of the alterations to the Claypit Street, Brownlow Street, London Road to form a mini roundabout junction have been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The highway alterations shall be implemented fully in accordance with the approved details prior to the development being first occupied. Now, I think that's absolutely crystal clear. There's no wriggle room. It's belt and braces. Then we have an amendment applied to this condition, and it goes through our planning department and is passed, which completely waters down that condition. So it now reads, no dwellings shall be occupied until full engineering details of the alterations to the Claypit Street, Brownlow Street, London Road to form a mini roundabout junction have been submitted to and approved in writing to the local planning authority. The highway alterations shall be implemented fully in accordance with the approved details. Now, the problem with that is there is no backstop at all. I mean, this mini roundabout could be installed in 50 years' time. There is no backstop. And in the answer to my question at full council on the 11th of May, it says, and this is legally, technically correct, because of this variation, there is technically no breach of planning control as the details of the roundabout have been agreed, and there was no date for the implementation of the works within the condition. Now, the problem is we've managed to snatch as a council defeat from the jaws of victory. We had a belt and braces planning condition on a mini roundabout. We're not talking about some multi-million-pound building work. It's a mini roundabout, for goodness sake. And then the condition, we've allowed it to be varied, and there isn't a backstop. And I keep on about this. I've been on about this mini roundabout now for years. And the problem is now, I toured round Talbot Manor last night. The houses have all been built. I was absolutely amazed. All been built. The developer is literally in the process of leaving. When is this mini roundabout going to be installed? And when are we going to make sure that this planning condition, and it was important this planning condition was put in place because frankly the planning application wouldn't have been granted otherwise. There was a lot of opposition locally to this particular planning application back in 2014, and here we are now in 2023, and I'm still waiting for the mini roundabout to go in. Thank you, Leader.
And then I'm no doubt I'm going to bring Tracy back in a moment.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I echo those sort of comments, because planning is agreed, conditions are imposed, and then afterwards developers come back and ask for amendments to be made. And quite often these amendments are not circulated. They're not circulated to the parish, town councils, they're not circulated to members because they're considered to be not major alterations. I have one, and I have a parish council meeting tonight where there is a planning application which was approved, and it's a single plot, and the owner of the plot has put in an amendment to it, and the planning officer has said, well, this is considered to be a minor amendment, so it isn't subject to any planning. Now, the local residents, there are 41 residents who passed comment on the original planning application. None of those have been notified. The position is being changed, the property is being changed because it is considered to be minor. And it's these amendments which go in by developers afterwards, which I think need to be more widely circulated so that comments can be made and comments like Councillor Biggins can be incorporated and ensure that I use the word watered down, but it isn't, that maybe not applicable, but it doesn't go away from the original planning conditions that were originally placed on the application when it was considered. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Evans, and I have some sympathy with that too. I have a number of people in touch with me at the moment where, and Tracy's aware of this, where we have outstanding works that are part of the planning application. Tracy, do you want to come back in on that first part before I talk about open spaces?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Biggins and Councillor Evans are correct. So there is so conditions are imposed on development. If a developer does not adhere to those conditions, it is not an offence, it is not unlawful. It's not unlawful to build anything without planning permission. It's about regularising that afterwards. What tends to happen when, particularly on large scale developments, when work commences, there's a need to amend works just through the construction of the development, and the planning system allows for that. So there is a process around submitting a discharge of planning conditions or a variation of planning conditions. That is a formal process that developers can do, and that is there for exactly that purpose. It does not mean to say that just because the developer hasn't done it in strict accordance with the original plans, it is unacceptable. There are lots of options and variations. And then I think added to the point that Councillor Biggins raised around the 278 work, so the roundabout, some of that delay is down to our highways resource. So I explained earlier, we have a backlog of years of 278 and 38 agreements that are waiting to be followed through and completed. And we would find it very difficult to take enforcement action against a developer when it is the responsibility of the council to have those 278 works progressed, if it is our own services that are not doing those works. So we have to be a bit proportionate around what enforcement action we can take and when we can take that. So I agree and understand totally, and I'm aware of the one that Councillor Biggins has raised, and we will do all we can to get the developer to do those works in a timely way. But sometimes it does take years, unfortunately. The point around the minor amendment, it's a completely different application to a discharge of conditions or variation of conditions. So there is opportunity for parish and town councils to comment on discharge and variations. On minor amendments, they are what they say on the tin. In fact, many years ago, they weren't even an application. They were just a letter to the planning authority to say we want to change a position of a door or change some very minor works. And that's exactly what they are. They are not about significant works to a development. They are minor works that is about allowing, the system allows the developer to just get on and deal with those things just by exchange of letter. Hence why there's no wider consultation on those types of applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Yeah, I think that the one thing that really does concern me sometimes is where I hear that developers are supposed to be doing the work, but we've actually agreed that we will end up doing the work, and then it doesn't happen. And I think, you know, we've got a situation in Shirehall with that at the moment, which I'm aware of. So I'm very keen that we tie, and it comes back to what Councillor Barrow said, you know, we need to tie these developers down extremely tight. Let's be honest, they will try and get away with as much as they possibly can. The one comment I would like to make actually is about the the role of the member of staff looking at how green spaces are utilised. And I use, and I might be completely out of line here, Tracy, and I apologise if I am, but I use the Otley Road development as a really good example, where you've got a significant number of different house builders all creating their own little green patch. And actually, if there had been a bit more oversight, we could have actually created a park and had a meaningful green space. And I think that's where this person is so important. I also really welcome, because I'm involved in 2 of these issues at the moment, some way of helping housing homeowners who are paying a maintenance company for non-maintenance. And I'm involved in 2. So, you know, if there's a way that we can help with that situation, you know, and maybe even, you know, maybe there's a commercial opportunity for us here is actually to do some of this work, because frankly, the work that is being done on some of these housing estates is poor, to say the least. Tracy?
Thank you, Chair. It flows from the local plan. So we have strategic sites that are coming through our new local plan. And when we have our local plan adopted, as those sites come forward, it's about that planning of those sites. So having master plans in place ahead of developers just parcelling up sections of the site and doing exactly as you say, Councillor. So it's about planning ahead and having the resources to be able to do that. And of course, that's the sort of phase that Eddie's team will be going into once we get the local plan over the line. Yeah,
and I do appreciate that a lot of that happened when we didn't have a 5-year land supply. So I do apologise for that. Okay, so I'm very happy actually just picking up on Councillor Julian Dean's point about the action plan. Tracy, I'm going to look at you on this one. Is it possible to get that action plan back to scrutiny for July?
We will try, yes.
Going to try very hard. Okay, in which case, the one other thing I was going to suggest, Tracy, because it's a really good point. I think their members are perhaps not all completely informed about building control and the differences between using our building control and an organisation using a different building control. Yes, I think it should be a briefing for all members post 2025, but actually couldn't we organise a briefing in the meantime, and the members who feel the need can drop in? I would certainly welcome that. So from the chair, I am absolutely happy to propose these recommendations, as are, and also that we'll put another one in that says, tongue-in-cheek, Amanda, but that they're going to try really hard to get you the action plan by July. But I would like to see that action plan in July, because I take Julian's point, we need to crack on with this. So even if it's a draft version. So I'm very happy to propose it. If I've got a seconder for that.
Councillor Ian Nellens, I'll second.
Okay, all those in favour? Thank you very much, and thank you, Joyce, and thank you to everybody who took part in that task and finish group, because I know it was very well received. Thank you. Okay, so moving on to item number 7, Treasury Management Update, Q4. Councillor Gwen Butler.
Thank you, Leader. Again, this is a housekeeping report that comes through every quarter. The only thing I would mention is I think it's interesting on the rate of return we've got on our interest compared to the benchmark, which was the future rate of 0.14%. And I don't think there's anybody in this room would believe where interest rates have gone since December. You know, nobody expected it to, but it is inflation, which is the devil we've got to beat. So the report is there to be noted. The Treasury team are doing a good job. And I move the report to be noted, Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've got a seconder for that report.
Yeah, Councillor Kirsty Hurst-Knight, happy to second.
Thank you. I see no hands. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 8, which is the Climate Strategy and Action Plan Monitoring Report. Councillor Ian Nellens.
Thank you, Councillor Ian Nellens, portfolio holder for climate change, the environment and transport. Carbon performance monitoring report. Climate action and carbon reduction are integral to all aspects of the Shropshire Plan, and the plan set out delivering the Council's corporate climate change strategy and action plan as a strategic objective through promoting the means to tackle climate change and reduce our carbon footprint, including the adoption of low carbon energy for our assets and for communities. Whilst the level of reduction in our corporate carbon footprint is disappointing, the past 3 years of carbon monitoring have been influenced significantly by the COVID pandemic, as indicated by an increase in direct emissions from a return to normal services after 3 years of disruption. Inevitably, there is a lag between identifying potential actions and projects and the delivery of measurable savings. It takes time to build momentum and deliver improvements, and many of the things that we're actively developing have yet to be completed, or if they have been completed, they haven't been completed in time to contribute to the savings of this year of our reporting, as is 21-22. Shropshire Council has invested strongly in integrating and normalising climate change and carbon issues, but it will also take time for the internal governance measures and projects which we have started to develop to take effect, and we expect performance improvements to accelerate significantly in future years. The majority of Cabinet members and senior management team have now completed accredited carbon literacy training, and further cohorts are planned to target the remaining senior staff together with commissioning and procurement staff. We also now have 4 trained in-house carbon literacy trainers and are developing a training strategy to roll out further training to staff and members over the coming year. Our direct emissions are now only a small part of the Council's corporate carbon footprint. The vast majority of emissions, that's 93%, are now from the goods and services that we commission in or procure. Shropshire Council is one of only a few councils that report the full extent of its carbon emissions, including indirect emissions. Given that further performance improvements will therefore rely heavily on reducing indirect emissions, we have commissioned a detailed analysis of our supply chain carbon emissions, derived from an analysis of all goods and services which the Council has purchased over the last 3 years. This will allow us to identify those suppliers and council services which are responsible for the majority of our indirect emissions, so we can work with them to reduce the carbon emissions which they generate on our behalf. As well as seeking a lead by example, Shropshire Council is continuing to invest heavily in projects which do not benefit our corporate performance directly, but will help to reduce emissions for our communities and business. Current examples include the EV charge infrastructure, business energy advice, and the recycling bin rollout. So I propose that the Cabinet approves the recommendations at 3.1 and 3.2 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Lennon. So I have a second of that report.
Councillor Gwilym Butler, portfolio holder for Finance Corporate Resources, formally second. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Julian Dean.
Thank you very much. Let's start with the good news. I'm very pleased to see the idea of commissioning some work on resilience and adaptation. We know that much of the climate change that we're facing is baked in. We know it's going to affect our communities. It already is affecting our communities. And so to begin to really get to grips with what resilience and what adaptation needs to look like is crucial. And that's, I think, that's just going to get higher and higher up the agenda in reality. It's also good to see that there is a proposal to do some work on home efficiency for staff, working with Lendology, who have come across before. That's a good piece of work, and I hope that that will roll out some real co-benefits for our members of staff in terms of dealing with their own energy bills and home efficiency. And finally, it's good to see that we're beginning to get to grips with the procurement strategy. We've got some major contracts in works, and we need to make sure that our procurement gets that right, because quite rightly the report makes the point that it's our contracts which represent the vast majority of our carbon footprint. So that's the good news. The bad news, of course, is that we're talking about a guesstimate of a 1% increase, and it's a guesstimate because that's largely based on Scope 3, where we are sort of more or less estimating emissions. And on page in 2 of the report, it asks the rhetorical question: are we on track? It doesn't actually answer the question. I think quite fairly clearly we're not on track. The answer does have to be no. It would have been interesting to have seen some, if you like, some graphs which actually show the trajectory that our climate action plan should be taking us along, because I accept that there will be slower movement in the early year or two, and that it would hopefully accelerate, but we don't have that graph to track whether we're on track in that sense, but I think clearly the answer is no. Scope 1 increases are clearly very concerning. So Scope 1 is the fuel that we directly burn ourselves, the fossil fuels that we directly burn ourselves, and the majority of that is in transport and in heating in buildings, and we're clearly not getting to grips with that yet in our own footprint. And if you then look at the action plan, when it comes to heat in buildings, the only thing I could find was improved building energy and carbon performance by encouraging zero cost behavioural change by staff. So we're asking our staff to do the work to reduce the carbon footprint at zero cost. That isn't a retrofit programme. That isn't a plan to insulate council buildings and to transfer the heating of council buildings to heat pumps. That's what we need to have, is a plan for doing that, rather than asking staff to change their behaviour, which is not a realistic way to decarbonise our buildings. Similarly, I'm not finding anything which really gets to grips with our transport. Now, scope 1 is small, I accept that, but scope 1, if you like, if we think about what scope 3 is, scope 3 is everybody else's scope 1s, and so on. So in reality, we need to set the pace on how to decarbonise transport and buildings so that we are leading in the county so that others can begin to do the same thing. And that, in the end, is what will reduce our scope 3. It's getting other people to reduce their scope 1s. And I don't think we're getting to grips with that. We're not leading the county in the way that we need to be. There's a whole load of other detail which hopefully will come to scrutiny and will be looked at in the partnership panel that we have. But I do actually want to call out not just the council, but some of our other partners. You know, we're not seeing the business chamber turning up to the performance board. We don't yet hear sufficiently from the ICB when it comes to the carbon footprint and work that could be going on in the health service. My suspicion is that their carbon footprint is actually larger than the council's, and we need to see them as a partner. And I think there are many other partners in the community and in the business sector who could be stepping up and taking part in this work more effectively. But I think the big story is that we are simply not on track, and that we need, in particular, to start getting to grips with heat in buildings. So my final point around that is that, you know, I was banging on about this when we were talking about our economic strategy, that one of the reasons why we, for example, did not bid for the latest round of social housing decarbonisation funds was because we know that the industry sort of doesn't exist locally. But that's what our economic strategy should have been about. It should have been about, you know, tooling the county for the transition that we need to make. It's a bit like the way we now talk about transport. We no longer talk about predict and provide. We talk about a strategic drive towards a new form of transport. Well, actually, we need to think about our local economy in the same way. It's not just about supporting growth. It's about supporting development in the areas which we actually need to develop in order to be resilient, in order to adapt, and in order to reduce our carbon footprint, whilst at the same time bringing real economic and well-being benefits to our communities.
Thank you, Julia. Julia?
Thank you. Yeah, I just want to raise 2 points. One really is picking up on Councillor Ian Nelling's point around the power that we have through our contract relationships with our suppliers, because scope 1, as it's defined by the government, is really our direct relationships, which are in fact a small fraction, as you've described, of our wider work. So much more of what we deliver is now subcontracted. So although it's described as scope 3, it's still very much the delivery of this council, and I think that is where we can have the largest impact for the smallest cost, which is about being proactive and building in these conditions when we are writing new contracts. Now, we've heard about the timescales to review the highways term maintenance contract, and we discussed in private session some of the details of that. I heard no mention of this, about climate change, around reducing emissions, and this is where we need to be doing this upfront and proactively. We just heard on the previous item the cost of having to react later and mop up problems because we didn't put the legal requirements up front. So we've talked about it previously with highways around the huge value we can get if we put more effort into managing our contract relationships better, and I believe stronger, and I think that we must put more resource into that. The second thing I'd like to raise is that through Labour's alternative budget proposals earlier this year, one of our ideas was to suggest that the council set up either another company or another arm of Cornovi that could be dedicated to that retrofitting training work, which was all about helping other organisations and buildings of the council to be more energy efficient. And we were told that you loved the idea in the administration, that you'd be exploring it. We'd love to hear how you've got on with that, because this would do exactly what you would like to achieve. And we heard last week at the Environment and Economy meeting, we heard from Professor Mark Barrow saying that actually the work of Cornovi has helped the council understand much better those problems around viability and how the council could have a more direct impact on some of these issues. So we've given the idea, you loved it, what have you done with it? And why aren't you using it to solve this really big problem?
Councillor Butler.
Just to answer Councillor Buckley's alternative budget proposal, that was dealt with by performance scrutiny, and I'm sure as she sits on performance scrutiny, she would have put it on the future work plan for that committee to look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Okay, Councillor Inman. Sorry, Ian, 1 second. Sorry, Roger. That's on my own line.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I echo all the comments that Councillor Dean and Councillor Buckley made. It does concern me a little bit about the resources that the council is actually devoting to this. It is a climate emergency. The council unanimously agreed to adopt that. We do have a small team, and I can go through this report and I can pick up many comments about it. Explore, could be designated, still being developed, limited by its capacity. And I congratulate the work that is being done at present, but I feel the council needs to look at this and ensure that as much resources as we possibly can spare actually goes into this to try and address it. I can well remember a year ago, 18 months ago, where Cornovi were doing a development and they couldn't put solar panels on the roof of the properties they were building because of the return that was expected by Shropshire Council on the development that they were actually building, which Shropshire Council provided the capital for it and asked for the return, and Cornovi couldn't do the solar panels on it. So we are building problems in the future. And one last question, can I just have confirmation that our small budget of 0.5 million, was that fully spent in the last year? It does come up later on the agenda, but I thought it might be better to bring it up now and just get confirmation that all the available cash that we've got is actually being spent to address the problem which we all need and urgently want to be looked at and reduced. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Roger. Tim Smith.
Thank you, Leader. Yeah, I'd like to pick up the point from Councillor Evans first. So firstly, yeah, I would like to just recognise the work of the Climate Change Task Force team led by Adrian Cooper. I think the answer to your question in terms of the £500,000 revenue funding that's in the budget is that it was pretty much completely spent in the previous year, and we're at the previous financial year, and we've got a budget for this year. We'll ensure that that will be spent. I would just like to point out that the team and the council, we have been able to secure a high degree of capital grants for the council to actually continue to develop some of the projects. We've got £3.8 million of capital grants, which we're really pleased with, and also revenue funding that will bolster the £500,000 that we've got in our base budget. We recognise the importance of this, putting resources to one of the key priorities, obviously, in our Shropshire plan. So I think it's also fair to say that it's a broad range of projects. I'm sure Councillor Nellings would agree with this, that we're looking at various things that are referred to in the report in terms of things that we're looking to reduce in terms of our carbon footprint, and also things that we're supporting, some of which are really quite innovative, not only for the county and to demonstrate to our economy, but also to those beyond Shropshire. And I think that, as ever with some of the innovation that we're looking to put in place, that does take a little time. So I think that I do absolutely take the point, and I agree with comments that have been made about the work that's been taken in partnership cross-politically to actually look at what we can do, and really, really committed to do that. In terms of the comment that was made by Councillor Dean in terms of transport, we can take a more direct and active role actually in decarbonising our fleet, and we are. We're looking at other methods of managing our fleet and ensuring that they are, wherever we possibly can, EV charged. And we're also doing some, this is again exploratory work, but I know if Mark Barrow was here, he'd be talking about the work that we're starting to do on hydrogen energy, because we believe that that is going to be a key feature of our economy looking ahead, and we're working with other companies and universities researching that. So that's really, really important. I take the point about the building decarbonisation scheme. We haven't finished bidding to government for that. They do. It does become a little bit more complicated, but in fairness, the government are investing more, and we have been successful in getting grants to actually do some of that decarbonisation work. But I do take the point that we do need to accelerate that. I do want to just maybe reassure we're not just assuming that turning lights off will actually achieve where we need to be, but it's a point well made. And then in terms of procurement, you know, Councillor Buckley does make a really, really important point there, as you were quite rightly saying, that we can influence, and we should be influencing that through our procurement work and how we set the standards for others with whom we procure. So I think in the report it talks about 33% influence we can have in that market, and clearly our commission spend is high. So just one example of that, very recently with WSP as part of their contract renewal, is there's an element called the Built Environment Consultative Contract there, and we are working really specifically with them to ensure that the whole supply chain tells us how much carbon they're emitting in terms of their supply in that contract to them and also back to us. And that will be featuring a lot more in all of the contracts that we are commissioning at the moment. So we're fully committed to that, because I absolutely take the point about Scope 3 and the importance of that to improve.
Thank you, Tim. Councillor Mellons.
Thanks very much, everyone. First of all, Julian, thanks very much. I value the advice and support we get from yourself, Rosemary, and the other members of the cross-party panel in doing this. When you mentioned about the graph, I think if you look at, obviously, I think on page 68, page 69, see the projects. It doesn't give a graph as such because there's a lot of unknowns yet, but there's a lot of exciting projects there which will eventually take off, and I would predict that what we're seeing now will turn into a hockey stick effect in hopefully in the next few years. So there's a lot of stuff there that will. Sorry. Yeah, but as in, you know, from what we're trying to achieve, but you know where I'm coming from. Yeah, so if you look at those schemes, you'll see what is going on, and there's a lot of stuff. It does take time. Rome, it's a little thing. Rome wasn't built in a day, and we know there are. We talk about an emergency, but there's still services that have to be provided, and we have to do that. And some of the stuff that comes in Scope 3 is stuff that is required urgently, so we have to go with that. But that's why we are taking the measures. In answer to Julia's question, a lot of the measures in the Scope 3 are being addressed through this report, and with the analysis we're doing in order to find out where that, through using artificial intelligence, to find out where that has been used and where we can make those contractors improve their, as Julian said, their Scope 1s to help our Scope 3. So that has been addressed in that. Roger, I think your point was answered by the previous ones, but obviously the funding, we're one of the few, but the only part of the council that actually has extra funding. And that shows that we are putting that interest in towards it. Not only that, as Tim mentioned, the grant funding that we've been successful in getting for things like electric vehicle charging and various other options that are coming forward will help for a lot of schemes in the future. And as we seen with that, once you get one foot on the ladder, you get the momentum, and we get outside interest. And we're starting to see that hopefully with transport as well, where we can start getting that level of securing funds coming in. So I'm quite hopeful on that side. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Butler, sorry, I forgot to bring you in before you.
No, thank you, Lee. Just a couple of points. Firstly, picking up on the procurement agenda, which obviously falls within myself. We're doing a big piece now on the social value of procurement, and I think this fits in very nicely because it is all about the bigger social agenda. So we'll certainly be picking that up along with that. I'd just like to take the opportunity, Leader, to thank the officers. As we speak, the electric charging points are being installed in Little Old Clibbery Mortimer. Now, this recognises that a lot of our residential properties in the conservation area do not have the ability for off-street parking. So it will be a boon to encourage more people to get electric cars, but it will also encourage tourism. We're a big walking area So if people have got electric cars, they'll know whilst they're off having their walk, they can charge up. So thank you to the team, and a great spend of money.
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
Thank you. I just, first of all, I should have started my remarks by thanking the work of the team. I absolutely recognise that there's a real dedication and a level of expertise which is of great value to us. So I wanted to put that on record. The second thing, just with regards to procurement, I think that it would be good to know that the carbon literacy training rollout is specifically going to be targeting people in procurement, because I do think that would be really valuable.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if Ian, you want to come back on that one?
Yeah, it's after the leadership team being done, it was planners and procurement were the two places that we really want to concentrate on. But the more people we can roll out to, the better. We've had great assistance from Save Our Shropshire, the climate literacy training, and I know it has been pushed out. I know Market Drayton Town Council have a number of members who have done it. I know there is interest from not only Save Our Shropshire to push it out further afield, but for other smaller parishes to get involved as well. And if they're all doing their little bit, it will help as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few points from me. I wasn't aware that the ICB and the Chamber of Commerce hadn't turned up to the partnership meeting, so we can try and put some influence there. And I'm sure you're right, Councillor Dean, that their carbon footprint is probably very large, I would imagine. And just to pick up on Julia's point about the doing a sort of an apprenticeship scheme of some sort. We have had conversations both with Cornovy and with Shrewsbury College. I haven't followed that up recently. I don't know if Kirsty's got any further information, probably not. The last conversation I had with James Staniforth regarding a college course to look at retrofitting, they couldn't find anybody to actually teach it. And that's the problem that we've had with a number of things that we've talked to the college about doing, is that they are struggling to actually get to get the lecturers and the people involved. But I'll find out where else that has gone, or if it has gone anywhere else. Okay, so I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so moving on to item number 9, performance monitoring report, Q4 22-23. Councillor Rob Macy.
Thank you, Leader. This is the final report before a new set of key performance indicators are used to report progress on the Shropshire Plan. Having served on scrutiny, I'm aware that these performance indicators have been in process for some time, and that's something I know myself, Cabinet members have been pushing for to have in place for monitoring for the current financial year. Obviously, this is Q4 of last year. I'm glad to say the proposed set of new indicators are being finalised, and these include the feedback we had from members at the session in November 2022, and I'll keep members informed on when these are in place. And of course, we'll be welcoming feedback from scrutiny and members on their ongoing effectiveness and where we need to make adjustments going forward. The report indicates most indicators as achieved or on track. Those are green and yellows within Appendix 1 of the report, with a small number either not on track or achieved, indicated by the red items in the report. Within the actual report itself, there's additional commentary on specific areas, which I won't go into. And picking out some of the items, the Stepping Stones project has exceeded its initial targets for supporting children to step down in their care needs or prevent escalation of need. The project will now assist more families. Whilst the overall number of looked after children increased during the year, the rate of increase has slowed compared to previous years, and figures stabilised during the final quarter. In addition, the number of people admitted to residential and nursing care during the year is reduced and was lower than profiled. Looking at a service that affects all households in Shropshire, Shropshire will remain in the top quartile of local authorities for its recycling and reuse rates. Annual rates of household waste recycled and reused have reduced slightly by 0.8, just over 0.8%. The main causal factor was the dry weather last summer, which reduced our garden waste collections. Council tax and business rate collections are both better than target, which, given our financial plan, remains vital to the success of the council going forward. Just touching on the reds that are on the list, the homeless strategy, there's a full comment within the report about that and the planned progress on that. One of the others I thought I'd just pick out was the rate of people who were killed or seriously injured on the roads has seen an increase. Just to give it a bit of background to that, the rate is based on the number of people killed or seriously injured over a 3-year period. This is divided by 3 to provide an annual average over that time. The indicator is not an indication of accident rates, because one accident can involve many vehicles and many people. The rate is expected to increase during the next 15 months. The lockdown period saw much reduced rates. So with traffic levels now increasing, rates are likely to increase over that average 3-year period. Claimant counts have increased. This is in line with the comparator groups, and our claimant rates remain lower than others. Figures are also impacted by universal credit, which requires a broader span of claimants to look for work under the job seekers allowance. As universal credit full service is rolled out in particular areas, the number of people recorded as being on the claimant count is therefore likely to increase. I look forward to bringing the revised report for one of the new financial year, and with that I'll move the recommendations in the report.
Have I got a seconder for that, please?
Yes, Chair, Councillor Cecilia Motley, portfolio holder for adult social care, public health and communities. I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Councillor Roger Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, it's good to see this and hear that the new performance indicators are coming along. But I did pick up, I think, the words to say that when they are ready, we will issue them. I would hope that scrutiny or some members outside of the ones who are preparing it can actually see a draft set before they're finally issued, just to ensure that everything that we want or has been logged, whether they're there or not, may not be up to us, but I would hope that we can actually see the draft set before they're finally put into place. But on the report that's before us today, homeless strategy, I see it's delayed, and I did go to a discussion recently where there was a representative from ARC who was there, and some of the stories that were said there and their experience of how Shropshire Council is assisting the homeless and the rough sleepers did cause a lot of concern to the meeting that was held. I'll talk to the appropriate officers outside of this meeting, but the way they were being looked at, helped, was of concern. Looked after children, stepping stones, the £2 million nearly extra that has been saved from that, it's congratulations to all. But I do note that the comparator group, which we're there, we are above the English, West Midlands and partners there. So we are above that figure. So it isn't something that is it something to be good that we're looking after our children? I'm not sure. But as I say, it's there. Kirsty, we're out in amount. And then I look at the local plan. I see we are now down to 5.6 years of housing supply. And my concern there also is that it shows us as being 100% on target. The local plan, according to legislation as I understand it, should show a 15-year projection. It did when it started in 2017, and when it was extended by 3 years to 2038, a couple of years later. But we're in 2023. 2024 is not that long. And if we have not got a 15-year projection on the local plan, will it be ruled as not being valid? So how can we be 100% when all the delays that there have been due to whatever reasons, and we still are waiting from the planning inspector to give us any date of when they're going to hold the public meeting? Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. I'll bring Councillor Hurst-Knight in a moment. I don't know, Tracy, whether you can answer any questions around that local plan point, because I certainly can't, but otherwise we can get a response back to Councillor Evans if you wanted to check that out.
We can provide a response a fuller response to Councillor Evans, but the local plan is on target, and we are still waiting for the date for the inspector to do the second round of hearings. We have got a 5.6-year housing land supply, and it's really important we get our local plan over the line to ensure that we have a secure position on our housing supply.
Yeah, thank you, and I'd like to encourage Mr Gove to finally get the planning reforms over the line so that we can actually do away with the 5-year land supply. That would be even better. Councillor Hurst-Knight.
Thank you, Leader. I just wondered if I could take this off. Thank the team and the work that they're doing. I think we've got to remember that this is quite a new team and that we only recently filled all the posts, and the work they are doing with children, young people and the families in Shropshire is phenomenal, and we must congratulate them. It is something to be congratulated. I think that, you know, this is positive news, and the work that they're doing, you can see the numbers. Not only are they stopping children coming into care and working with the families, but let's remember the children that they're helping exiting care so that they don't go back into care. And that is vital work, that the families get the support through stepping stones. So absolutely, yes, it's something to be congratulated. And let's remember, I think I'm right here, 84% of our children met the court threshold. So it's not just deciding for them to come into care, the court have decided, and Ofsted, as I say this time and time again, inspected us, a thorough audit, no child came into care that didn't need to be, and we look after our children well in Shropshire. So yes, the team should be congratulated. So can I put on record our thanks to the team?
Thank you, Councillor Hurst-Knight. Yeah, thank you for that. And Roger, regarding the comments around the ARC, that's not been my experience at all. In fact, I've had exactly the opposite said to me. So we'll come back. I think, you know, that the homelessness strategy, you know, officers accept that there has been a delay to that. But actually what we have done, which ties in with what you've just said, is that actually, you know, the reset team that are out there doing the work, and actually I'm out with them on Monday, you know, they're actually out there doing it as opposed to writing about it. Yes, we need a strategy. They know that. That's now in place, ready to go. But that's not the comment. So I would be grateful if you'd have a word with some of the officers, because that's not what I'm hearing back at all. Okay. Julia?
Thank you. I just wanted to come back to Maisie's presentation of the report. Whilst it is useful for us to have that context, which helps us understand where some of the poor performance sits and what some of the reasons might be, I think at some level as a council there also has to be some accountability when there is poor performance highlighted in the report. The purpose of this report is to show us where we are failing, where things are not succeeding. And it's not acceptable to say that all of these have an external justification. There's always an external reason beyond our control. We also have to assume responsibility. So coming back to the number of people killed on roads, I've lost count of the number of times that parish councils, town councils, Shropshire members have asked that work be done to reduce speeds on some of our roads. Some of them are known accident black spots. There have been year-long campaigns to ask that highways put in speed reductions. It's not rocket science that not doing that is going to see an increase in fatalities. And I know from my own experience on Bridgnorth Town Council, we had a unanimous request that most of the town centre in Bridgnorth be deemed a 20 is plenty zone. That was over a year ago. Nothing has happened other than one of the fatalities on your list was an elderly lady knocked down and killed on one of the roads that we identified should be reduced. So I am putting it on record, please, that the council has some responsibility here and that we need to escalate officer resource, taking on board Tracy Dark's comments about the challenges there. Officer resource needs to look at this. It's a preventative measure. We've all heard from Kirsty Hurst-Knight the value of early intervention to reduce later spend. This is a quick win. It was in all our alternative budgets to put in the 20 is plenties, reduce not just fatalities but road traffic accidents, and it's a gift to Richard Marshall because it reduced the costs of road maintenance when you slow down their speeds. Now, the last one I want to touch on was the discussion around the claimant count, because it isn't the general claimant count, is it, Councillor Macy? It's our young people. It's quite specific, isn't it? The over 18s, under 18s and the 18 to 24. So the increase, the worst increase in unemployment in our county is the young people. And actually, at national level, it's 3 times the average unemployment rate. So we need to look at that. We can blame the terrible government for all the disastrous things it's done to our economy, but at some level, in this council, we have to start caring about our Shropshire young people, and let's not have another generation of forgotten children. Thank you.
Just on the first point that Roger raised around the performance indicators, I gave that assurance to scrutiny during their work programme sessions, and absolutely I'll be working with the performance board to come back with those, so happy to discuss those. They're going to be a broad suite of them, so they will be ones that we pick out for reports like this that are most pertinent at the time. But yes, happy to come back and have that discussion. I think in terms of Councillor Buckley's comments, in terms of the killed and seriously injured, I don't believe I made any comment about external blame or other partners or anything else. I just made a comment on how the statistics are prepared and the impact of COVID upon those. I'm making no other comment. I'm not the portfolio holder for highways. So to indicate that I did, I'm afraid is incorrect. In terms of the increase in the claimant counts and so on, that doesn't sit within my portfolio. This is the hard part of this report. It sits in others. But we're talking about 50 people in total, just to give some context for the size of the people we're talking about. I think everyone sitting around the cabinet table would agree that we do as much as possible for young people and in growing the economy. But if others want to add comment to that, other than that, that sits outside of my remit. So.
Councillor Julian-Dean was first.
Actually, no, I was going to make some other points. I wanted to make some other points. First of all, with regard to the development of the KPIs, and I'm really glad that you started your introduction by making the point that, you know, we've been living with the new Shropshire plan for a year or so, and we still don't have the indicators for measuring the success of that right across all the various targets. I'm concerned in terms of the capacity to develop that, but also whether we're working with the partners who potentially could be contributing to that. So, for example, you know, Zero Carbon Shropshire for some time have had very clear targets around how to decarbonise different sectors, and they, you know, those are useful. I know that the Shropshire Good Food Partnership has written to Leslie and to other councillors offering to support the council in developing targets specifically around some of the public health and land use and you know, sort of healthy living areas. So I think working with partners, and hopefully that means that the targets, that there'll be an iteration of the targets, that we continue to develop them, that they won't just be stuck in stone, and that we also publicise them effectively, that our website actually is honest and transparent in terms of showing where we are and where we aren't on target. The other point was just really to point out to the members in the room, you know, that the two headline grabbers from the local elections, if you like, one was around the handing out of the purple bins. Yes, that's done very successfully, but unfortunately wasn't part of a waste reduction strategy. So whilst that took place successfully, we've actually seen recycling rates tip up slightly, tip down slightly. So that, you know, that was precisely the point that we made at the time, that the bins are not a bad idea, but it's about doing it within a strategy which is a waste reduction strategy. And at the time we simply didn't have one. It is now, I believe, being developed, but that's unfortunately cart before the horse stuff. And the second one is that the other headline grabber, of course, was around road improvement and new pothole fund, but actually on page 9 it shows that we're flatlining in terms of road conditions. So your two big promises are not really producing any actual change in people's lived experiences.
I'd like to come back on the last point about the bin. And I'm sure Councillor Dennis will jump into that as well, is that if you looked at my mailbag, Councillor Dean, it might not be having an impact on the amount of plastic recycling that we're collecting, but it is having a major impact on the amount of plastic recycling that isn't being blown around the rural areas. And if there's one reason for doing it, that was it. I think the other thing that I would pick up on is that in terms of that waste reduction strategy, Councillor Macy was very clear that the amount of green waste that collected. So in terms of our plastic and recycling, it was the amount of green waste that actually brought down our figures last year. We can't win. We're criticised because we've got one of the highest waste amounts in the country, and yet we're being told we need to recycle more. So, you know, it doesn't seem to matter. We can't win. Councillor Lyons, I know wants to say something about that.
Thanks. Our high waste, sorry, I'll try to get that out again. Our high rates of waste are mainly made up of our green waste that is, contributes, which also helps to contribute towards our recycling as well. Clearly this year, the summer, as Councillor Macy mentioned, the grass cuttings weren't as much because of the weather, and there was only a small difference because by the time the end of March came around, it had, you know, the weather changed again, and there was more grass cuttings, etc., and hedge cuttings. But that is a major contributor. Not all the data will have been in for the mixed recycling bins yet as well, so that's still lagging behind. We haven't got the full data on that. If you think, it was only this time last year the rollout started, so it has taken a while to go through. But as the leader said, it has been popular, and we do predict that it will show improvements in the future. But tied in with that, we want to do waste minimisation, and the waste minimisation. I know the waste team now. We've got a new member in leading the waste team now, who's already looking at different options of various ways of recycling materials, not necessarily through our own bins, etc., but things like electronic waste, etc. It's all being looked at and how that can be sorted out as well.
Thank you, Councillor. You wanted to come back?
Yes, so just coming back, Councillor Macy, I suppose what I mean is that you've brought together this performance report for us to consider. The areas where we are failing, there have been statistical or external for the failing. There has been no acceptance by any responsible cabinet member round this table that the council has any role to play, and I'm really disappointed that Councillor Richard Marshall, who is responsible for highways, isn't even in the room. And I hope that when this comes to performance management, or its new name, that he will be in the room, and both he and Gwilym will answer these questions and engage in a meaningful conversation which is beyond statistical explanations and beyond external factors. What part does the council have in trying to improve these areas where it is currently weak?
Thank you, Councillor Buckley. I'm just going to come in Rob, brief one. You seem to assume that this report is brought to cabinet and nothing happens to it, that no cabinet member takes responsibility for any poor performance.
That's what they're showing us today. In this public meeting.
I beg to differ, Councillor Buckley. I beg to differ. Every single cabinet member looks at this performance report. We had a major discussion about it on a number of occasions because we want to drive up performance, especially in those areas where there are red and yellows. Obviously, the green ones are in place, etc. But you're basically alluding to the fact that nobody in this room cares.
Unless you do it in public, nobody will know that. What you do behind closed doors is your business. This is the public meeting at which you are presenting these figures to the public. So unless you explain to them, I'm trying to help you by teasing out what you might be doing, they will never know.
I'm not actually sure we to say that you're trying to help us in this, Councillor Buckley. I think that's probably the most amusing thing I've heard all day. I'll bring Councillor Butler and Councillor Macy back in, and then I'm going to move to the vote. Councillor Butler first, then Councillor Macy.
I think the one comment to make, I'm just a bit shocked by Councillor Buckley in some ways, but in transparency and openness, why would we bring this forward if we weren't looking at it to say this is a problem we need to do something about? So we are, and we are transparent and open as far as possible to every resident in Shropshire. Now, when I was head of chair of scrutiny, I think it's something that performance management would like to take back when it looks at the fatalities on the roads. I would like to know the percentage of those fatalities that are on Highway England's roads. Because I know when I looked at it at scrutiny a few years back, the majority were on Highways England's road, of which we have no control. So it'd be a good piece of work for the performance scrutiny to look at, but that was the historical history behind it.
And those comments are really
Chair,
useful.
please.
I agree, Chair. That's an excellent comment. That's the first time anybody in this room has accepted that there's work this council could do to move it forwards. If you look at the conclusions and the recommendations in this report, none of them talk about any action that this council will take. The conclusions of this report today describe mitigations and justifications for the results. They do not point at any time to what this council plans to do to improve. You're telling me that you do have those conversations privately, but you've neither included it in the report, nor until this very second from Gwilym have any of you verbalised it to the public or to us members.
Because if you're talking about mitigation, which is in this report, what is mitigation? Mitigation is about changing something. Moving on, Councillor Marshall, Councillor Macy.
She's already complained there's 2 RMs on the initials now, and I'm afraid I'm not becoming Richard Marshall. In terms of that, thank you to you both for highlighting that we are delivering on the pledges that they made in the manifesto in terms of offering people a new recycling bin. And on the second one on highways, we pledged that we would put more money and invest more money into our local roads. The survey indicates that we're headed towards stabilising the conditions, and additional investment is already planned within the budget. So thank you for highlighting we're delivering those. In terms of, you say no one's mentioned about the red indicators or brought to their attention, I specifically pulled out each indicator where there is a concern on there. And I've done that in the introduction to my report. I can't put that any clearer that I've included those. I think with some of these issues, you're saying that it's the first time that people have said the council could do something or look at them. I think, as Gwilym has just indicated, a lot of these issues have been looked at through scrutiny, through other processes and so on. And maybe it's a bit of that historical side that maybe there is a piece of work to do to bring those together in terms of what has already been looked at and what new bits should be looked at going forward. You made the point of it's not clear which bits we're looking to include. I think that's the point of the Shropshire plan, and that's the point of having those clear objectives and working that down, and then having those indicators on there of where the council is involved, where it can make a difference, and then it will be the job of scrutiny and others to look at, is that difference being made, and are the resources following that? So I would hope that as we're moving forward with the new approach to it, and that's being developed, that will become clearer and clearer at reports like these. So. Okay.
Thank you. Through the chair, Councillor Buckley.
To that more detailed discussion at scrutiny, where we'll get down to the.
We'll now move on. Just one point following what Rob's saying. Councillor Evans, I don't think I'm talking out of turn, Rob, when I say that basically what Rob and I have said is let's get these indicators out there so that we can get them in front of members so that we can see whether they're suitable. Because if we try and make them perfect, and we send them to you and they're not perfect, then we've wasted more time. So Rob's going to get them out as soon as that is practically possible. Okay, so I've got a proposer and I've got a seconder on that report. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item, so Andy's got to leave, unfortunately. Thank you, Andy. Moving on to item number 10, which is the financial outturn. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Ollie. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you, Leader. On introducing the report, I think it's important that we set the scene. The budget for 22-23 was approved in the first half of February 22. We predicted inflation at 3%. We had no knowledge of the Ukraine war. The following surge in fuel prices, resulting in 12% inflation, hit us hard as everyone else. No one can ignore how expensive everything has become compared to where it was. We have also incurred and consumed a far higher pay award, deservedly, for our staff than was envisaged, and come through a cost of living crisis over the winter supporting our residents in Shropshire. This has been compounded with the extreme pressures we've had to deal with in children's services and adult social care. It is also noted how unhelpful when partners renege on their financial responsibilities to the council and ultimately the people of Shropshire we serve. I do not think they realise the impact it has on their demand by not supporting us, and the bigger impact it can have on the overall picture and for people trying to live their best lives in Shropshire. Taking all this into account, to come to the current overspend is no mean feat, and it could have been an awful lot worse, and we were predicting far higher in Q3. Thanks must go to our staff committed to this organisation and the endorsement of the Shropshire Plan. And this is starting to show how our investment in the staff around getting it right, getting leadership right, we are already starting to see green shoots on how the organisation is changing and rising to the future challenge. Although the overspend of 8 million has had an impact on our general fund, general fund, the surplus of over 4 million in the collection account will help offset some of that in this financial year. I'm also content that our forecast to put reserves back up to sustainable levels are a crucial part of our plan to sustainability of this council. To conclude, Leader, we have seen the fact that inflation is our enemy, and with that being at a 40-year high, not predicted, and the unprecedented turmoil in the world, which has had a severe effect on all government services. If inflation had been how we projected back in early February 22 on Treasury guidance, I would estimate we would be showing a surplus this last year and already rebuilding our reserves. Last summer, I stated at Cabinet we were heading for a storm, and we did, and we have come through. The last year was the start of the beginning of transforming this council to a modern, efficient, sustainable council fit for the future generations of Shropshire. I move recommendations A to J. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Graham, and I'm happy to second that report. Councillor Evans?
Thank you, Chairman. As you may well expect, I've looked at this report, and it is with some disquiet that I read it, that the council says it is good that it is better than expected with an overspend of 8.5 million. It all depends how you look at that. In attaining that 8.5 million, we've had extra bonus from the interest from the bank. We've raided or used a lot of earmarked reserves as one-offs. We've got extra collection tax. We've got extra interest there from all over the place. But I also note in the report reference about the LGA Finance Peer Challenge and a revisit that they made. I can read it out. The council has very little remaining in its general reserves, delivery of at least 95% of the savings that are listed in the financial report which went to the previous council in order for it to avoid depleting its reserves to a level which seriously jeopardises its financial solvency. The 151 officer has said a number of times that the budget that the council is adopting all the time is unsustainable.
We're talking about last year's financial report, not the midterm financial.
Yeah, I am, but it's the hangover from this report of £1.94 million, which has been added to for this year. So looking at this, and if one looks at the report itself in 4.5, it says to ensure financial sustainability in future years, an overspend on the scale seen in 22-23 cannot be accommodated. So yes, it is there. It has been, the overspend has been limited to 8.5 million, but it's only done that by use of a lot of one-off reserves. And what I would like to be assured of, that we are now in June, the new financial year started in April, and I want this council to still be a functioning council and in charge of its own resources in April 2024 and April 2025. And I'm not sure that I can be assured, especially looking at the LGA Peer Challenge report, which I've asked to see a copy of, and it just has not appeared yet. And it would have been useful to see that before this meeting, because obviously they were given some of the information that's in this report, and I would like to see what the peers, other councillors and other officers from other authorities have actually view this, and hopefully we can see it shortly. And I'd like to know when that report will be published. I didn't even know they'd actually been, but okay, I'm only in the opposition, I'm not in the administration. But 8.5 million overspend, and using all the resources, the one-offs that we have had to do it to maintain the council, I would hope that this coming year, the more than the 61% savings, which was accomplished in 22-23, and 61% of the savings when it was going to be quite hard. That is not counting the extra costs of those who need help from the council. These are the savings that the Cabinet said would be made In 22-23, only 61% were again saved. And what the peer review says, and it's in this report, says that this year, 95% needs to be saved for it. So £50 million is a lot. So that's why it gives me concern that we, the council, and you might have heard me on the radio saying that I am a councillor, I want to work with the council, but I need to know where and what direction we're going, what roads we're going down and everything like that. There are still consultations in progress to be held on where the savings are, but looking at 22-23...
Councillor Evans, can I bring you back to Gwilym's point? This is the report about last year, not the MTFS.
Yeah, but it does refer, and it refers indirectly to it. That's why I've taken the liberty of doing it. But yeah, 8.5, it was a challenging year, but it's only been done by a lot of one-off funding that was used to actually help the council through that year.
Yeah, can I just say one thing first? I just think it's really sad, actually, that at one point last year we were looking at an overspend of around 17 million, I think it was, with the inflation and everything else. And I think it's really sad that you haven't said that the staff have worked so hard on this. If I go back to sort of around December time of last year, when the staff were, we'd never we didn't put a spending freeze in place because that doesn't help anybody. The staff got together, it was actually the early days of getting leadership right, but they got together to look at ways of reducing the overall deficit, and also looked at the ways that we could start to transform the organisation. That's what you saw from then to now, which is basically a 50% reduction in the outcome that we thought we were going to get. But also they're taking that forward. So I want to place on record, I say not the finance team, James, I don't mean that, not just the finance team, every single member of staff in this authority who've worked their socks off in the last 6 months. Financially, this council has been in a very difficult position since 2011. This cabinet is dealing with that situation. And we will succeed this year. And you might say, well, you've got no choice. But we will succeed, Roger. We absolutely will. And I do slightly get a little bit disturbed when I hear you say things on the radio that says something like, it's our council, we all want to work together, and yet you constantly use the word they. There is no we in this room. There is the cabinet and you who constantly criticise. Your alternative budgets didn't make any difference to the actual overall outcome at all. None. And actually, you will find as you go forward in this year that once again, the job we are doing is incredibly difficult. Incredibly difficult. It's very easy to sit where you sit and throw constant criticism without giving the staff or the cabinet members the credit they deserve for actually bringing us into this position this year. Councillor Butler.
If I can come back, Chairman.
You can come back after Councillor Butler.
With respect, Leader, I think you said most of what I was going to say.
In which case, Councillor Evans.
Yes, I am a councillor, and it is in the interest of all residents of Shropshire that we do get through this next year and the following year. But to do that, you need to be involved. And as I said, and I'm now talking about this year's budget, as I said, at the February and the March meetings, it would be good to know how and where the savings are going to be made. They are one-liners in the financial report. I have no knowledge of it. I do not see it at all. So how can I be involved or help or contribute towards it? Because I, as an opposition, are treated as an opposition. We are not brought into the same room or have any discussions with it. As far as the alternative budget goes, if you give us the resources, I'm sure my colleagues and myself could actually come forward with proposals. But to produce an alternative budget and not provide adequate resources to do it, I think is paying lip service to it, quite honestly. And I hope that really takes it forward.
Councillor Butler.
A few mopping up, I should say. Hopefully the peer report will be on the website this week. It has been delayed because the officer involved has been on annual leave, just to make your point on that one. I think you've got this impression, Roger, that I've got this team of people behind me, you know, doing everything for me. All I have is regular meetings, probably once or twice a month with Ben Jay and James Walton. Well, that is it. I do the work. Okay, so where you think this resource is coming from, I do not know. A few things you mentioned about the percentage of savings delivered last year. Now, and we've seen this ongoing for years in this council, that we project we're going to do this, we project we're going to do that. So as part of our Shropshire plan, what did we introduce? Getting leadership right and getting it right. Just because what we did last year does not mean we will be doing it the same this year. And I think that's a really important point to make. Roger, and to all the other leaders of the opposition, one point I want to make clear: I will do the best I can to make this transparent as I can in the limited resource we've got. Part of that, and it's always been my frustration, that when we see the quarterly financial report, it is usually 3 months later. And we're talking about history, aren't we? What happened 3 months ago. So I'm trying to make it far more up to date and movable. And part of that process is we are hoping, it hasn't started yet, and we're trying to kick it in, and this is a hope of the direction I'm going in, and I'm sharing this with you, is that we will get monthly indicators and monthly financial reports, right? Now, I have stated that I don't want to wait for those to come to Cabinet after quarter 3. I want them after period 2, the second month, to be hopefully looked at by performance management and transformation, or whatever it's called now, before it gets to Cabinet, in that period of openness and transparency.
Chairman, can I just come back to the last one? Yeah, and I do agree that both Graham and yourself are more open than were previously. And I admit that. And hopefully we can take it forward, because we are, and I use the word we, are in a position where we do need to work together to actually solve the difficulties that have been imposed on us. We've inherited, use whatever words is wanted.
I will make the point quite flatly now. I don't think you could do any different. Because
let us try. Councillor Buckley. Married to a history professor, he would oblige me to say that we could at least learn the lessons of history. And one of those lessons is that you might have had a problem since 2011, Leslie, but Shropshire's had a Conservative council since 2009.
Point made.
So,
the next point?
No, my next point is that some of the explanations in this report, which explain why savings were not made and why we've gone over budget, are things such as failure to make savings, slippage in capital receipts programme, increased demand on services because of complex need, higher inflationary costs. All of those problems, although historic because they were for the previous financial year, there's no reason for us to believe that those same problems stopped on the 31st of March. So we should all expect, I know that a lot of the economic situation at the moment is volatile and unpredictable because of our terrible government, but there's no reason we couldn't predict that those 4 factors which you blame for this situation are still present. So we are quite right to be concerned.
I'm not saying I'm not predicting them.
Exactly. So all of us collectively, and this is a collective concern, should be very worried, because as the LGA peer review said, there is no room for underperformance, and the explanations for underperformance still continue. And the thing that I share most of all in Councillor Evans' comments is how very grave the situation is. Politics aside, none of us want this council to go bankrupt. It's such a serious situation that we're in, and if your offer of sharing that monthly report is real, I think we would all appreciate the timely updates on what is a very grave financial situation. And I think that none of us should underestimate how very serious this report is and the situation we find ourselves in.
What I'm actually offering is that it will come to you before it comes to Cabinet, and it will be more live than it has been.
Councillor Motley.
Thank you, Chairman. It always gets a bit depressing when we have Councillor Julia Buckley hand-wringing all the time about the dreadful situation that we're in. And I would just like to point out that we're all very much aware that we're operating in very difficult times at the moment, and we are taking stringent and speedy action against it, certainly in my portfolio area. What we are really getting into at the moment is early intervention in a very big way, both in the public health field and in the adult social care field, so that we can identify problems with health. We can identify problems that are affecting our young people, such as too much vaping going on. Obesity strategy is in place, helping people with drug problems so that we actually stop them getting to the doors of the hospitals and then having difficulty discharging them afterwards. So it's not a question of us all sitting back and saying, woe is me, this is all too difficult, it's all too dreadful. Actually, we're working our socks off, and when it comes to paying tribute to our teams, I really pay tribute very strongly to both the adult social care teams and also to the public health teams, who are doing the most fantastic work. We've got all sorts of new ways of dealing with people who have got problems. We can see them up in Oswestry. There's the new setup up there. I would recommend members actually go up, or at least don't go up, because that would probably crowd them out. But I'm very happy to provide details to the work that's going on in Oswestry, holistic work to try and help people with problems so that they can actually manage their lives better. And an awful lot of this is about helping people manage their lives better so that they can be happier, so that it improves their mental health. But it's all about doing it soon, early intervention, and that way we will stop the problems building up. And I'm absolutely certain that this is going on all through the council, all through the portfolio areas of the council. So please don't give us this thing about this is all so dreadful, what are we all going to do? We better just stay in bed, because it just is not the real world.
No.
Thank you.
I'm going to bring Councillor Jess Barrow in.
Just a point of clarity, and I'm so pleased that Councillor Buckley is interested in the history of the council, and you mentioned about the administration taking over in 2011. A lesson in history: when we took over the council after opposition running the council for many years, the council reserves were dangerously low, and we actually took it higher. So please, if you're talking history, know your facts.
Councillor Councillor Macy.
I think my only thing is looking at, and taking Graham's point, this is last year's report and so on. I mean, I've only recently rejoined Cabinet and been on scrutiny, and it is interesting working with the officers that they are obviously bringing experience forward from last year. They are very focused on what they are doing. They realise that this is a serious year, and I think that comes through to where scrutiny has been of there needs to be focus this year. So as much as other issues will come up as topical issues and we will say, what's the council doing, should they be involved, and so on, this year, as you're saying, if this year is right, this sorts it. So I'm just conscious as well of whenever I go to a meeting and there's more things put forward of the council could be doing this, should we be more involved in this, and so on. At the moment, what I've seen from the officers is there is far more focus around this is what we need to get done this year, this is what we need to deliver. We will look at those, and scrutiny have said the same with their work programming, but some of those things may not be this year. So,
final word, Councillor Butler.
I actually think it's been quite a useful debate, and and I take on board quite a lot of what's been said. But if we go back over the last probably 5 or 6 years, this council prior to COVID was hanging on fairer funding, which prior to COVID we stood a really good job of getting. Then we had COVID, and as soon as we came out of COVID, we actually we believed that, and we knew that fairer funding was dead. So we had an opportunity then to learn from our history, learn of not relying on other people to deliver for us. And this isn't just Shropshire Council, this is local government across the country, whichever way you look at it. So we actually looked at what wasn't working and what wasn't going right. We brought forward the Shropshire Plan. A big part of that Shropshire Plan, as I've said before, is getting it right and getting leadership right. So I would hope, Roger, especially 61% of savings in this historic report, by actually changing and investing in our staff and investing in this organisation to get it right. I, like yourself, want this council to be a modern, efficient, most importantly, world, sustainable council standing on its own 2 feet, and that is what I'm going to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Water. Right, I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 11, which is the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities technical consultation on the proposed infrastructure levy, Shropshire Council response. The reason this has come before us today is that it is time limited, so it had to come to today's cabinet meeting. So I have a briefing note here, and I have read through the report, and Eddie and Dan are at the back, and I'm sorry, but I do have a question for you that I would like to have asked you before cabinet, but I'm going to ask you in cabinet now. But anyway, the purpose of this cabinet report is to consider and agree the council's response to the government's current consultation on the introduction of a new infrastructure levy as a key mechanism for securing developer contributions towards infrastructure and affordable housing. Currently, improvements to infrastructure and wider services impacted by new development are achieved by 3 main sources in Shropshire: 1, planning conditions; 2, Section 106 legal agreements; and the Community Infrastructure Levy, or SIL as it's lovingly known. The government consultation is inviting comments on both the principal and technical aspects of the establishment of a new infrastructure levy, which would largely replace SIL and Section 106 agreements as a key mechanism for securing developer contributions towards infrastructure and affordable housing. It would operate alongside planning conditions. Responses to this technical consultation will inform the preparation and content of draft regulations, which then themselves will be consulted upon should Parliament grant the necessary powers set out in the Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill. Appendix 1 of this report sets out the proposed response, which is structured around the 45 questions asked by government, with responses provided to each specific question where it is considered necessary and relevant. In arriving at responses, officers engaged Shropshire Council members and specifically sought views from the cross-party local plan member group. From the outset, it should be recognised that the proposed changes, if agreed and implemented by government, are proposed to be implemented through a test and learn approach over a number of years. However, whilst there are no immediate implications to Shropshire, it is clearly important this opportunity is taken to express views on the consultation, both positive and negative. There are clearly things to be welcomed in these proposals, and the response in Appendix 1 seeks to provide a constructive position wherever possible and where it is felt there could be some significant benefits to Shropshire. Most notably, the core intention to increase the overall amount of developer contributions available for infrastructure improvements through securing a greater amount of the land value uplift from development is clearly welcomed. In addition, there are a number of other aspects which the Council broadly supports, namely the ability to establish local rates, the ability to have differing rates for different types of development and geographical locations, and land typologies, i.e. greenfield and brownfield. The proposed distinction between site-specific integral infrastructure to be funded by the planning condition and levy-funded infrastructure is also supported, as this largely replicates the current split between Section 106 and SIL-related infrastructure, with the SIL focusing on strategic cumulative impacts from a number of proposals. Continuation of a neighbourhood share provided to town and parish councils will be an update to the current SIL Neighbourhood Fund, continued prioritisation of affordable housing and recognition of the need for enforcement measures. However, there are a number of aspects of the proposals where concerns are being raised and where we seek further clarifications, most notably significant concerns about added financial risk exposure to the new arrangements. This matter primarily relates to the fact that the final levy for contributions is only established upon the completion of new development, takes us back to what we talked about earlier on, as opposed to on planning approval, as with what Section 106 and SIL. The proposal to include reductions of levy payments for small sites, given these sites represent a significant proportion of our total development in Shropshire, that might not be a good thing, and the inclusion of affordable housing rates within the overall levy as opposed to a separate discrete contribution as is currently established with Section 106 contributions. The Council's proposed response therefore identifies a number of potential amendments in order to maximise the benefits of any new infrastructure levy. Recommended that we agree the proposed response to the consultation captured in Appendix 1, and we have to get this in, it's Thursday, I think, Eddie, is it? tomorrow, Friday. In view of the urgent need, and this bit's important, in view of the urgent need to submit the Council's consultation response on the 9th of June, the call-in and urgency mechanism in paragraph 17 of the overview and scrutiny procedure rules will need to be applied to ensure that the response can be submitted within the required timescale, i.e. can't call it in. I'm happy to propose this report. I first, again, saying a lot of thank yous today, but thank you for the work that's gone into this. And I know that the members on, I think Roger was one of them actually, on the working group, but really valued that. Councillor Roger Evans.
I was going to say, I support it, Chairman. There are one or two items I might phrase differently, but in general, fully support this, and it is something that we need to all get together. And I say thank you for letting us be involved with it, and it is something where the council can do things together.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dean.
Yes, to echo that, thank you very much for the work officers, and it was the cross-party member group has worked well on this. I think I just wanted to highlight one thing, which is the sort of small site, single house sites. You know, it's very galling when you see millionaire mansions being developed and no infrastructure contributions being made whatsoever, and that's certainly a situation that is affecting my part of town. So I'm glad that that's in our response.
Yeah, and I forgot to ask. I think Rob, you're going to second this report, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm happy to second, and just having had SIL on my plate previously and dealt with that, I think that the response is a good one. It's right for what Shropshire needs from this consultation. And initially it just did concern me that they're trying to make SIL even more complicated, which is something it definitely does not need through this process. So
no, we certainly don't want that. So Eddie, the question I was going to ask you, at one point there was an opportunity for they were looking for pilot councils. I was going to ask, did we agree or did we disagree, or is that later on? Yeah, come to the desk. Thank you.
Thank you. On that particular point, we haven't explored that explicitly yet, but there was an opportunity for us to do that. I think this is the same response I've given to other councillors who've asked the same question, is that we were early adopters of the SIL. Sometimes I would say it is better to view what others are doing first, but I understand that there might be if there is opportunities which we would want to explore, we can ask the question. It doesn't necessarily have to come through this response, but we can ask the question as a separate, a separate thing as part of that.
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. And I do agree that sometimes it's best to sit and see what everybody else does. But I just think for sometimes, because, and I know Rob, what was the word you used? Tainted by SIL, was it? I know SIL hasn't always been that easy within the council, but actually I think that's the delivery of it, not the SIL itself. I think community infrastructure level as far as planning goes is quite sensible. However, Councillor Dean, I do take your point about single sites. So if nobody else has got any questions, ready? Oh, Rob?
Can I just say though, but I think in my time it was revised 4 times. I think if they do this, a period of stability is probably going to be the bit that really gives it a good test, rather than it constantly changing.
And it would be really nice if the terminology was very straightforward, as opposed to SIL neighbourhood and SIL local, which still creates so many issues. Thank you, Eddie. I have a proposer, I have a seconder. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. That's carried. Thank you, Eddie. Moving on to item number 12, which is the River Severn Partnership Demonstrator Projects. Councillor Ian Nellins.
Thank you, Councillor Ian Nellins, portfolio holder for climate change, the environment and transport. The River Severn Demonstrator Projects, council officers excuse me, have been working with the Environment Agency through the River Severn Partnership to identify a joint approach to climate resilience and the best application of £4.5 million of demonstrator monies. The partnership was successful in securing the funding to deliver a pipeline of demonstrator projects which support early thinking and work by the Environment Agency on the Severn Valley Water Management Proposal. And that's to test innovative solutions to long-term resilience in the Upper Severn catchment. Use natural flood management techniques, that's floodplain reconnection, wetland creation, woody debris dams, woodland planting and so on, to slow the flow of water. and also to accelerate delivery through until 2027. The first project under the demonstrator programme commenced in spring last year, led by the River Sevens Trust with partners from Powys Council, Shropshire Council and the Environment Agency. The Galsfield Brook project was the first under the demonstrator programme. There is now a need for the partnership is ready to progress 2 further projects under the demonstrator programme involving work on the Red Brook and the River Perry. The Environment Agency assurance process has agreed an application of the investment of these 2 projects, which comprises £900,000 for the Red Brook project and £800,000 for the River Perry project. As these 2 projects exceed £500,000 in value, cabinet approval is required for Shropshire Council to progress the grant funding. I propose that the cabinet approves the following recommendations. First of all, to approve the council's role in managing the delivery and Shropshire-based demonstrator programmes on the River Severn partnership, utilising the council's full statutory role as a lead local flood risk management authority. Approve the council signing 2 grant funding agreements with the River Perry and River Brook, which exceed £500,000 in grant contributions, thereby enabling transfer of the DEFRA funds to Shropshire-based delivery partners. To delegate the executive, delegate to the executive director of place, Section 151 officer and the portfolio holder for climate change, environment and transport to proceed with setting arrangements for the delivery of the monitoring of benefits associated with the demonstrator programme in partnership with the Environment Agency. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Motley.
Yeah, I'm happy to second.
Thank you.
Yes, I welcome this report. Just a couple of minor points, really. I mean, firstly, I think we should recognise that the Environment Agency is a really valued partner. It's a difficult time for them. They've had 50% cuts over the last few years. It would be helpful if our local MP would get off their back and recognise that the work they do with Shropshire Council, both on flooding and in making completely sensible advice on the North West Road, is exactly what they should be doing. That would be very helpful. And secondly, I'm glad that you're highlighting the need to deal with, natural flood risk management. And again, if our local MP could stop talking about taming the river, it would be helpful, because it's a completely misunderstanding of how you actually do this. So those are my only points. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Dean. I'm just really pleased to see that this is finally coming to fruition, actually, because we've been, talking about this for a long time. And I know the Raybrook in particular, I'm not so familiar with the Perry, but I know the Raybrook does create additional flooding issues at the confluence. So I've seen some of the work with the Gilsfield Brook project, and I think we shouldn't underestimate either that this is where England and Wales starts to work really well together on this, and that's not always necessarily easy. So, Councillor Buckley.
Just to say, I also welcome the report. I think it's exactly what we need, not just for Shrewsbury and the areas that are identified, but the wider knock-on effect for all those other communities further down the River Severn. I represent Bridge North, which is also affected by flooding, but doesn't hit the threshold to directly receive any funding at this stage for this type of work. But this is exactly either an example of what might be done in the future, but we will also benefit, because by treating the river in this way and using nature, working with nature, we will all benefit. So actually, the impact is much wider than just the areas that are affected. It's absolutely welcome, and I think well done to all involved.
Absolutely. I mean, and the slow the flow stuff has to be the way forward, because we cannot and will not be able to flood wall the whole of the River Severn. We cannot do that. So, I really welcome this report. I've got a proposer, I've got a seconder. All those in favour? Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item number 13, which is the exclusion of press and public. I'm happy to propose that. Have I got a seconder for that, Councillor Nellings? Thank you very much indeed. We'll just wait for the signal.